there. Um, I want a quick comment, and then I'm gonna go off on a little tangent here, kind of drawing a few things together because I've been listening to a lot of crazy podcasts lately. First, my quick comment, uh, T Jack, when you said like don't take it personally, and you mentioned Bill Burr at one point. That line reminded me of another great comedian. Um, and I think most of us are old enough here to remember the great Father Guido Sarducci when he said, "The secret to life is don't take it personally." So when something bad happens to you, pretend it like happened to your cousin, because then it's like, oh, that's too bad. And then you're over it. Now, to move on from that, like you mentioned Germany. I said Germany was going through the war, reparations from World War One. The economy had absolutely collapsed. Uh, Life was hard and everything sucked, and they needed a scapegoat. So people started to rally behind this idea of being anti-Jewish, anti-communist, stuff like that. Um, and I was listening to similar. I'm kind of getting into sort of a mob mentality thing. I was listening to a podcast earlier today. From the last podcast on the left, they were talking about the Salem witch trials. And it's like, how did they get wrapped up in this mob mentality? This was 1692. These were early settlers in Salem and Massachusetts, and it kind of spread around to Massachusetts, other parts of Massachusetts and Connecticut, but mostly concentrated in Salem, where life was hard and everything sucked. Inflation was high. They were dealing with indigenous people. There were wars going on against the indigenous people there and in Maine, and it was brutal. Like the way the white settlers were treating the indigenous, they do something really awful to their people during these wars, and the indigenous would come back with some even like crazier shit, and then the white settlers would come back with even like they're just constantly trying to outdo each other. Life was hard and everything sucked. Now we're at a point where inflation is high, the price of everything's high, housing costs are high. A lot of people out here saying life is hard and everything sucks. So it's easy to get caught up in this mob mentality where you're looking for someone to blame. You hear a lot of blame of immigrants. The leftists are to blame. The immigrants are to blame. Trudeau's to blame. And now we've got this social media as well, where, back in like the Ted Kaczynski days, he just kind of went off into his cabin. He hated society. He hated what was going on. But he did his things by himself, and it was violent. He killed 3 people as the Unabomber. But now we see these people are finding each other.
Yeah.
On apps like this. And politicians out there are kind of catering to these people with their simple sloganeering, dog whistles, and finding a way to rally those people behind them with simple phrases, axe the tax. There's no depth of thought to it.
Jail, not bail.
You got to keep it super simple.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of wrapping up my point there. Is just kind of like the life is hard and everything sucks. The mob mentality's out there, and everybody's looking for someone to blame.
So following Kirby's and then Mrs. Radical, tying those two together, and being the bystander. The bystander, according to Barbara Colarosa, is probably one of the worst offenders, aren't they? Because they could have, should have, would have kind of. The bully has their own issues, but it's the bystander that's basically, oh, geez, thank goodness it's not me. And that was the phenomena in Germany of the 1930s. And this is the phenomena that we're seeing in the United States today. It's not me. So, and that fellow at the store yesterday that I said we had that discussion, I really wanted to say to him, you're a privileged white old man with lots of money. Um, don't give me any crap about inflation or corruption or whatever, right? I can't stand idly by, and the idea of to be prepared, to know what we're talking about. There's no way Canada should have beaten Germany at Vimy Ridge in 1917, and this is an uphill climb for us on the left and center in 2025. Everybody thinks it's going to be a massive majority. I can't for the life of me believe at this point that the things that Poilievre is saying are amenable, responsible, or relatable to a majority of Canadians. And how, when push comes to shove, if we do our homework and we can say to people, look, you stand to lose your rights to reproductive choice. This isn't, so I was told that I was being, oh, you're exaggerating. This was at work the other day by a very intelligent man who I think doesn't really want to admit that. I said, dude, I am immersed in this, and maybe I'm reading all the wrong stuff. But if Trump gets elected in the United States, it ceases to be a democracy. They've been very clear on that, and so Democrats across that country, and they unfortunately, Biden is, and I'm not bringing that up as an issue, but people may stay home because of his position on Gaza, Palestine, and that's an unfortunate thing. But there has to be this engagement. I'm watching people say, "Oh, it doesn't matter. What does it matter? Why should I even bother voting? Biden is bad. Trump's bad. Poilievre is bad. Trudeau's bad. It doesn't matter who we put in." What we found is that if you put Obama in, you get somewhere moderately close to universal health care. The fact that he got elected, 30 million Americans got health care that would not have had it if he didn't get elected. If you put Poilievre in, do you really want to, and again, I don't see this as fear mongering, but do we really want to take a chance for my daughters that they may lose reproductive rights? We're already looking at clinics in New Brunswick being shut down for budgetary reasons. There's roundabout ways of reducing women's reproductive choice, right?
And I gotta say, reproductive rights for women, it's not just about abortion.
Absolutely.
I have a
Absolutely.
daughter with genetic liver disease called PVIC number 3. It's incredibly rare. We lost our first daughter at full term. Every pregnancy for me has been terrible, and I almost died on the first one. Now, does that mean now, if they come in with these issues, is my daughter going to have a choice to take all of the knowledge that's scientifically handed to her? Does she get an option of anything?
Yeah. And then he was talking about bail over jail or jail over bail. He's talking about using a notwithstanding clause to circumvent that. Okay, so you take the worst criminal in Canada and you take the right to bail away, and many Canadians go, thank God he's going to be put away. If you take the right away to bail for the worst amongst us, you're going to take the right to bail away from the most basic offender. Like, you can't take bail away from one Canadian and say it's okay for, where do you draw the line? That's why in Canada we've made unilateral decisions. There's the line. We have habeas corpus. You are entitled to a hearing before a judge. You're entitled to meet your accusers. You have your due process and a speedy trial, regardless of who you are. And as I said at the beginning of all this, if you're rich, that gets out probably a little bit better for you. Maybe if you're a marginalized Canadian, you might have a tougher time. I think we understand that. But generally speaking, we have this line. We have if you make $100 million, you still get universal health care. Because where do you
Just to interject quickly, we're at our 5-minute point, Mr. Dijak.
Okay.
I would like, there's so much to say, you know.
We can go over, the missus, we can go over.
Yeah, I'm all into that.
If we're all
I don't
in.
mind.
I'm all up for that. One thing I think that people have been disillusioned about is the power of one vote. When you made your comments earlier about how only 800 votes made a difference, if you watch in the United States, all their elections come down to a few thousand people in these key swing states. No different here in Canada. We can votes, like people have recounts because they're under a certain amount, right? Your power and your vote is important, and I think people need to start kind of getting more in touch with that, because it will motivate them to get out. If there is this lack of understanding about the power of one vote, if the conspiracy theory around that has disillusioned people, then I think that's why we've seen what happened in Ontario, where Ford got elected when nobody showed up, right? Because the power of one vote just kind of went out the window. And
Now,
I want to say,
I'm sorry, but are you in British Columbia, Mrs.?
I am.
Okay, good. Because I have a follow-up story that you might remember.
Okay, so when I call him Tiny Trump, when Tiny Trump is doing things like his jail bail slogan campaign, what he's doing is setting up to dismantle systems, right? Dismantle the systems within. They're getting people upset about our criminal justice system. He'll be able to go in and switch laws around. Now, why would he, like you said, most people in Canada, to be kind to the jail release thing, right? It's equal to everybody as well as for hardened criminals. But the majority fall in that sort of calmer area where they're not committing really, really violent crimes. The majority are happening with when people don't get hurt or violated in a physical way. So how do you, and why would you want more of those people in jail? You'd want more of those people in jail if you wanted to privatize our jail system so that you can run it like the United States run it and populate it with addicted people, in minority groups. And I feel that little tiny Trump has a larger campaign to dismantle and to sow seeds of doubt in some of our political norms, like CBC, for instance, and doing that a little bit at a time. He's sowing the seeds, so when he does these bigger steps, it's not a big hurrah surprise.
Absolutely, that's they may have built concentration camps 3 months after being appointed Chancellor of Germany, but they didn't really. They did no killing until 41. And it was a series of 4,000 laws that were created by the German government from 33 to 41 that incrementally made Germans more amenable to the situation. Now, to get back to your one person, one vote, Métis Mama, hi Métis Mama, mentioned that in Red Deer, their candidate lost by 157 votes. Okay. Now, Mrs., you may remember this story. Have you ever heard of a woman called Rona Ray Leonard, or otherwise known as Landslide Leonard?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Her riding was decided by less than 100 votes, my riding, and it was her riding that took away the ability for the BC Liberals to have a majority government. So because she pulled out a 100-vote victory, and it was recounted twice, by the way, and she won both times by that number, thereabouts, Christy Clark could not form a majority, and she lost on a vote of non-confidence, which led to the Horgan government. Voting matters. We had a woman by the name of Megan Kersons beat Sue Halstead for the Cumberland trustee position by 1 vote. They recounted 3 times, and she won by 1 vote all 3 times. I remember voting for the leader for the president of the Liberal Party of British Columbia when it was still a Liberal Party in the late 80s. And I said, me and a buddy made a donation on behalf of the young Liberals at the McPherson Theater at Timmy's Telethon. And I said, let's just go to the bar now. And he said, no, I promised Val Anderson I'd vote for him for president. And I said, one vote, come on. And so I felt such Catholic political guilt that I went and I voted for Val. My buddy talked me into it. We voted for Val. Val won by one vote.
Oh
If we had gone
goodness,
for that
you.
time, if we'd gone for that time, Val would not be president of the BC Liberals in 1987 or whatever it was. You know, I mean,
here's a sweet piece that came from MS Lotus and Ms. Lotus. She dropped in my lap, and I had forgotten about when Christy Clark lost his. You know who she? Do you remember?
say that again.
Who did Christy Clark lose her seat to?
Oh, yes. Oh, I can see.
David.
Yeah.
David. How's that for karma? We love it. We love it. We love it.
Hey, Radical, are you going to chime in here?
Hey, T-Jack, great presentation. Thanks very much for it. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Radical.
I just want to go back a little bit to something that Mr. Kirby mentioned about the parallels between us and relatively 1932 Deutschland. One of the things that I want to mention is that how much of the current outrage is manufactured. The prices are manufactured, the problems are manufactured, the issues are manufactured. If I might point out, if you take an example, Fox News, one of the things that they were pitching was the migrant caravan. I mean, this is not it's a problem, yes, but it's not a literal problem. In 1932 Germany, they were using the Versailles Treaty as part of the indignation that they were using to rile up the country. And that's exactly what Fox News is using. The Versailles Treaty is the migrant caravan. We point the fingers at whoever's kind of available, but all of the problems right now are essentially manufactured where they weren't in 1932 Germany. It was a systematic European problem.
Yeah. And they're distractions from the real issues. Right?
Yeah. Well,
Oh, yeah.
That migrant caravan issue distracted from his legal woes or the insurrection or anyone or the fact that he said the election was stolen.
yeah.
A lot of these things, what do they call it? Wag the dog.
Did you hear a couple weeks ago in Alberta, maybe it was a month ago in Alberta, when water levels went extreme low all across Alberta? And the first thing I heard come out of Daniel Smith's mouth was an attack on trans kids. And then all of the UCP started talking about trans kids. Well, in the background, they were actually renegotiating water contracts.
Yep.
Yeah, and so much of what we're seeing, we have to come to an understanding of what they're actually after, because I think a lot of the people on the left are kidding themselves about how serious the situation actually is. And the amount of outrage that they've managed to manufacture is rather astounding. I remember watching a documentary where they were talking to the top Luftwaffe pilot at the end of the war, and he was talking about the Mustache Man start. And he said the first thing that he did is put a radio in everybody's homes. And he said, can you imagine, and this is an older documentary, obviously, can you imagine, he said, if the Mustache Man had access to television like we do nowadays? But with the internet, what we're seeing is television on steroids and hopped up to the maximum. And they have a target audience that is incredibly susceptible to that messaging, because we got to get to, in our heads that roughly 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 people in our population really struggle viscerally with change, with adaptation, with adjusting to new information. This is a systematic societal issue.
Radical. I think I hear what you're saying, and I agree. I think the real problem are actual voting laws. I didn't realize this until about 6 months ago, that in the United States, 40% of the women, I think it's at least 40% of the women on the voters' rolls, their names don't match their names at birth because they got married. There's some, and they, no. It's 90% of women and 40% are being turned away. That's what it was. 90% of women, their names are not on their birth certificates, the name that they have trying to register to vote, because they got married and changed their name. 40% of these women, who would you not agree that 75% of them are in favor of women's reproductive choices? Like, they're being turned away. The idea that it's a crime to give water at a polling station to someone waiting to vote, they're limiting the hours of voting, limiting drop boxes. These are the real threats, I think, to democracy, because honestly, you can throw meat at the Fox News crowd, but how many voters does that represent? I mean, are you going to carry the day at the ballot box with those numbers? I mean, Radical, what do you think?
Well, one of the issues is they've known for roughly 10 years that essentially their numbers are dwindling, both in the churches and at the voting booth. And this is a long-term plan that's kind of been set into motion, because they realize that the numbers are fading the further in time that they go. And the hit on the public now has to be at the point where they don't really care what happens in the election, because I've asked myself on a number of occasions, why are they doing things that the public is absolutely against? There's no question, and the abortion subject and the IVF subject is a perfect example. They know if they go to the people that this is going to get shot down, but they continue to do it and they don't care. And the question that I had always is why do they not care how it's going to affect them at the polls? And the reality is they are going to ignore what happens at the polls. What they need is enough of their base to cause enough disruption and lack of focus and societal bullshit that we're not paying attention to what the ultimate goal is. And the ultimate goal is power by minority.
Yeah. And that's Project 2025 in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the fact that they've actually had the bravado to put this into print should tell you everything you need to know about what's going to happen with the vote in the states coming up. It's not going to be pretty.
And Meaty Mama points out that distraction is a powerful tool too, and I think that's important to point out here on the TikTok.
Absolutely.
And our conservatives have put their plan down in writing too. It's 76 pages. It overwhelms. In writing. Analyze that. A lot. Oh, no, it's veiled. Don't get me wrong. But
sorry, go ahead.
The Hodgen did a series where he did the policy of each of them, and the conservative policy was 76 pages. That came out of their AGM. Okay, so it's a basis for what they're going to be doing, and all the abortion stuff and everything is in there. It's just all in there in veiled writing that you really have to know how to read a sentence in order to connect the dots. And when you were talking about voting laws, Mrs. Radical, here's one that'll resonate with you, and Radical, you too. Here's something. We set up voting poll stations at things like long-term care centers, at things like universities, but not at shelters. And the shelter organization is not allowed to be political. And when you've got a big population, we have in the community that I live in, how come their voices are not allowed a polling station and their special needs around a lack of ID where somebody could vouch for them right in the staff at that shelter system where the most vulnerable people were the, because when they don't show up, their needs are getting, not met.
Did you
And
know
so
that
a little law, I think that could shift a bit.
homeless
would be
people
okay.
can actually vote?
Oh yeah,
Well,
I
they
know.
don't vote.
But Polyev, and one of my posts that I'm going to be doing in the coming weeks is how when he was in government, he actively worked to reduce the opportunities to vote. He it was when I was doing reading on it before Christmas, I thought this can't be real, because I remember the election campaign of 2015 talking about we're going to change the Elections Act that if there's no one can vouch for you, you have to have ID. But it gets worse than that. Oh God. Anyway, yeah. So
He kicked out the military that were out of the country, right? And he was doing this as the Minister of Democracy. That was his title, Minister of Democracy, because he got booted out of housing. Well, I think they put his housing portfolio in with the Ministry of Democracy. But yeah, he was actively, and there was something like 150,000 people. Remember, what's his name? Donald Sutherland got so upset because
Yes,
he's
I
a
do.
Canadian out of the country that wouldn't have been allowed to vote under Tiny Trump's new law, right?
Mhm.
Anyway, the first thing the Liberals did, I think, was to overturn that when they got into power.
I'm trying to find it, but it's not going to be in real time. The other thing that he wanted to do was to prevent education. They wanted to keep Elections Canada out of education. What Elections Canada did and does is they create a voters package with the with ballots and you're actually voting for the actual people, but their names are on the ballots. You get like the cardboard boxes that you can vote in, and then the advertising that's done online. The Harper government and Polyev wanted to eliminate that. And I remember asking the question, why would you want to eliminate the advertising that's asking people to vote? I mean, the ability to vote in this country today is extraordinary. There's like 69 different pieces or 60 something different pieces of identification.
Because he could win just like the same way Doug Ford just won the last election. Nobody
Exactly.
Sorry.
And that's why we can't stand as bystanders. That's why we come onto this platform. That's why I'm not keeping my mouth shut until I got a kick out of this one guy who said to me about a year ago, when we kick liberal ass, then you'll shut up. And I said, no, actually, that's when I'll just get started, because we're going to keep their conservative government's feet to the fire. You think that we're going to get, what was it? There was a gay rights guy that was being suppressed. Oh, what was the quote? Oh, it's on my phone. Anyway, and his quote was, when you try to bury me, those that try to bury me forget that I'm like a seed.
Harvey from Chicago.
That's the guy, I think it was.
I know who you're talking about. Sean Penn played him in the movie about his life. Yeah, first gay politician in Chicago. Harvey Milk.
The power of the vote. And I know it doesn't, like, well, for instance, I've said to students over the years, I don't care if you live in Kelowna or the Bible Belt, and only the NDP only get 18% of the vote and the Liberals 12. I don't care. That vote matters. That vote tells that MP, and I've heard from people on this platform that it doesn't matter to those MPs that are conservative, but it does if you go to the media, if you can make a stink, but that vote says to that individual, you're going to have to die on your deathbed remembering that 30% of the people did not vote for you, did not want you, and what did you do for them? And I also said to this lady, inundate his office with requests, right? Things that members of parliament are supposed to do. Do you want to go into the United States? Just call the office and ask, what do I need to cross the border? Or whatever. I don't care what it is, but get get in the face of these MPs, and always. In fact, the one time I didn't want to vote was, gosh, it was in 80. I think it was 91 election. I didn't want to vote, and I didn't like any of the candidates. And it was a provincial election. No, it was a federal election. What year would that have been? No, it was provincial. I went in and I put an X through the ballot, and it was registered as one of 12 spoiled ballots. So I made the paper the next day as one of 12 spoiled ballots. So my students say to me or ask me, well, why would you waste your time? And I said, because I wanted to make the effort to get off of my couch, go down there, meet with my citizens, my fellows, because as you know, your polls are the people that are your neighbors in your area. You can say hi and this and that. But I also wanted the powers that be to know that there were people that were dissatisfied, that I don't want any money. I wanted to make a statement. And I don't understand, I guess, when you're going through a divorce, your mortgage payments are due, your child is sick, maybe you're at Sick Kids in Vancouver, you just lost a pet. I'm making exaggerated examples for effect, of course, but those things overwhelm us as human beings. And the last thing that we give a damn about is Poilievre's notwithstanding clause. What the heck? I got kids in the class. What can you please explain notwithstanding clause again? Why would some 40-year-old going through any of that care? So our job then is to find ways of connecting those people to those issues. And the way I did it with kids was, how many here have been on Fifth and Cliff on a Friday after school and have had your backpack searched by a police officer? How many have had your backpack searched on a Friday morning or a Saturday morning at 2 a.m.? How many of you have been driving in a car with other teenagers and you're stopped because you're a teenager? No other reason. And that is probable cause at 2 a.m. for an officer to stop you. And so you try and bring any issue down to a level that can be connected to the voter. And it's a lot of work.
And I think people start understanding and accepting that nobody's perfect, including, especially our politicians. You're never going to agree with everything your politician you're putting your vote behind agrees with. Like right now in Canada, both contenders, the big contenders, support Israel, right? So that's a conversation. In the United States, Biden versus Trump, they both support Israel. So if you're one of those one reason voters, and Gaza is, you got no choice, right? And you got no choice. And in Canada here, I think it's important for people to understand that try to come to terms with the majority of your value system. Not 100% is going to be met by any one politician, and especially in your own riding. Like I live in a rural northern piece, right? Like some of the people that have run here in our riding, my goodness, they couldn't put pen to paper. Like they don't have quality in the candidates. And the candidates that are chosen, like because I live in the north, are chosen because they worked in oil and gas, not because they understand people, not because they understand politics, not because they understand so many things, but because they are simply in oil and gas. They get elected in these little small rural communities, right? I live in the community I live in. I have to vote for somebody that lives 5 hours from me. You don't even see them except once or twice during an election campaign, because they have taken my city, and this gerrymandering, but they have divided my city into 3. And the half of the river I live in, I now have to vote up north. And when they did that, they diluted the Liberal vote. And I'm the Liberal, right? So I didn't give 2 shits about that. But now I'm starting to kind of connect the dots on how strategic that was. But then Trudeau gets in, and I'm like, well, why didn't he fix that? Why didn't he fix this piece? And it's frustrating. It's frustrating.
So tonight we've covered so far, we've covered civility within politics, right? And the importance of it. We've covered the importance of voting. you know, for me, when I think about civility in politics, I comment a lot less. I use a lot more emojis. Sometimes I take some passes. Sometimes I just let people let them have their voice and continue on. And I do a lot of blocking.
Yeah.
I do a lot of blocking. If I see people on social media and I know that they are absolutely spreading misinformation, vitriol, I know I can't report them on TikTok because it's going to come back as not a violation or something. We've all had those experiences. I block them. I'm not going to be their venue to spread it.
Well, if somebody makes a comment that's quite rude, I go to their profile and they have 21 followers, 0 likes.
Mhm.
And I'm like, why am I commenting on that? But you know who one of my heroes on this site is? Christy. She
Rusty's great.
engages everyone. She says,
She does.
just got a question for you. Let me know what you think. And she takes them on.
She does.
I don't have the energy for that.
I couldn't be as graceful as Christy about it. Like she has a way of coming at it that not a lot of people can.
If I thought my charm could disarm,
Arm disarm.
then
Yeah.
okay, so let me leave you with this one quick little anecdote. You ready?
Okay.
Okay. I'm driving to pick my daughter up from school. As I'm heading to her school, there's 2 lanes. I'm here and there's vehicles here. Now, this lane that I'm in is a merge lane and it's long. So you don't necessarily have to make the move to go into that lane immediately after the back light. So
Correct.
I'm now starting to speed up a little bit and I'm realizing I still got about 400 meters, but I'm going to make the move. So I start to make the move and the guy, so here I am, and here's this guy here, and now he's speeding up. And I'm
He
like,
should be trying to accommodate
it's like,
you.
dude, you gotta slow down and let me in. I had my blinker on. I rearview mirror check, and and so I made the move. And he's leaning on his horn. And so I tell you that analogy to tie into this. You're just gonna run into people like this where you could put on your turn signal, you could roll your window down and go, please, hello. They're not gonna give you that. And knowing that the light was gonna turn red anyway, and he'd only be 1 car ahead of me. Where that you don't get a gold medal for that, you don't get a cash prize. What was the thinking behind trying to keep me out of that spot? I wasn't speeding. I wasn't a dick to him and in a previous lane. I don't even never had an encounter with that car at any other time on that route. So I couldn't. And then what I did, public confession, I went.
That a little earlier in our conversation with, you know, the groups of more than 10,000 can end up with these.
So I'm thinking there as I'm going, well, you can't do that online. And as Mrs. has pointed out, it is a smaller town. I wanted to actually, at the red light, get out of the car and ask him what he was thinking.
Oh, no, you might have a baseball bat.
Well, yeah, we're not in the States at least. Anyway, the point being is that you're not going to win with some people at all. You're just not. And
when you started this conversation, you were focused on the MTG fights that took place in the committee hearing with I think it was the one with Hunter Biden was on the call, right? And the vitriol that took place between them. So I went down a feminist rabbit hole and examining why women fight with each other in particular. And one of the reasons that was talked about was called indirect aggression. Because first of all, it's very low cost, and it's very effective, unfortunately. So women will often choose that indirect aggression, although it seems very direct. It wasn't actual violence, right? So this verbal vitriol is about indirect aggression and how women display that. And in places of power like that, there's an argument to be made for the internalized patriarchy, where if your job is sort of attached to who can impregnate you, your job is kind of held onto a male-powered system.
Yeah.
This indirect aggression moves you places within that system. And I found that interesting. So it explains why women might be willing to engage at that level of violence. Although really with MPG, I'm fully expecting a fight at some point. I think she'll take it.
She's trying to wear the big person pants is what she's trying to do.
And I feel it's strategic. She doesn't want to get work done in the house.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a constant deflection. Anything like I almost could see the conversation on the plane that the Republicans had on the way back from Donald Trump's trial. And it went a little bit like this. Gosh, we're really tired. We don't want to do this tonight. And she said, don't worry, boys. I know exactly what to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's good for fundraising, right?
Right?
I mean, half the stuff PP does for fundraising reasons. And then did you see what Jasmine Crockett did? The bold or the big, bold, butch body thing that she called MPG. She had it made into a shirt and they're selling like hotcakes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Texas, of all places.
There's a couple sounds now on TikTok with the rap, and I found it for our advertisement actually, and I did
an advertisement for show using that phrase. I fucking loved it when I heard that.
I did your intro with the advertisement of that sound.
Yeah.
I want to throw this out there though, that how much of this stuff is manufactured again, because one of the things that I've noticed is basically with the right, because of the type of people that they're catering to, basically they can slap the title woke on just about anything, and these dumb people will line up to buy it.
Yeah.
Simplify it, right? Simplify it.
Well, people are spending thousands of dollars for a piece of Trump's coat that he wore at his arraignment in Georgia, for God's sake. You know, I mean, I would wager the people that he's selling Bibles to probably have 10 copies at home, but they got to have him.
But and you see they all dress alike with their red ties and their suits and everything at court now?
I didn't understand that, unless that was some kind of a
you know what? I can tell you what that's all about now. A little bit of a history buff, and one of the interesting things about Genghis Khan, unlike everybody else at that time, where your family, your clan, your area was kind of the glue that held everything together, what Genghis Khan did is went exactly the opposite to that. And he basically said, I don't give a crap what your background is, where you come from, or who you are. If you are loyal to me, I will be loyal to you. And that is the exact tactic that Trump uses. And I've pointed this out on a couple of occasions, and I think people really kind of miss the ball on just how important a little notation that is about how someone like Trump operates.
The problem is he's not loyal at all. He says and they believe it, but he's turned on everyone that's ever worked for him, pretty much.
Everyone.
But you know what? I said about 2-3 years ago to Mrs. Radical, we were discussing how this whole situation can come up. And I said, one of the interesting things about someone like Trump is that he's essentially a figurehead. And, much like the, Joffrey in Game of Thrones, while he was the figurehead, he wasn't really the one pulling the strings of power. And that's something that we need to understand about Trump is he's a figurehead
every day too from Putin. He has lines he needs to read every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Radical, I completely agree with you. In fact, I have said consistently that if Trump were to die tonight, there would be just another 2025er that would take his place, and they would still have that machinery mowing its way through the electorate and the next election. You're right. I think he is a figurehead.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say though is that he has liberated those people that for generations from the Civil Rights Act were suppressed. And I use the term suppressed, meaning that they couldn't be overtly public really about their hate, their vitriol, their racism, their homophobia. You couldn't say a word. Like, you never really heard that kind of stuff until, I mean, you do. I mean, I'm not naive. In America, they had Nazi rallies during Clinton's reign and blah, blah, blah. I get it. But what Trump did is he made it hip or cool or safe to say those things for those people.
Mm-hmm.
Proud Boys.
Yeah, what I've always said is essentially one of the reasons that he connects with the base is they see him as one of their own. They know he's an idiot. They absolutely know that he's an idiot, but they attach themselves to it because they see one of their own finally dishing it out.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the scariest parts of all of this. And I even had one guy, I did a stitch of one of his comments because he basically said, I'm in this simply to see it burn down. Like,
Yeah.
I'm voting conservative just to spite the liberals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Radical to further your comment about Trump, the West Wing. It's one of the classic Aaron Sorkin shows. In the West Wing, President Bartlett's staff, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? With the West Wing?
Yep.
Okay. Wants to talk to him about his sense of humor and that it may have cost him Texas. He had joked about the hats down there being funny looking. No, the implication from Aaron Sorkin is that he spoke Latin, right? The implication is that Bartlett lost Texas, not because of jokes, but because the people couldn't connect with him. He didn't necessarily have that common touch that Trump does have, right? And that was the same kind of problem with Obama. I contend that some Americans hated Obama because of the color of his skin. Absolutely. But there were some Americans that hated him, particularly the intelligentsia of the Republican Party, because he could talk him into a corner. He humiliated them. They were stupid, lining up. If you had Obama debating any one of them, oh my God, you would talk him into a corner to make him look like a fool. You know, and so they hated him for that. And yet he could pick a good bracket for the NCAA, right?
On TikTok is people call themselves debates. They're not debating. Debating has a structure. You know, there's a you answer, you let the next person respond. There's a back and forth that's respected. Those are just arguments that are taking place that I see for the most part. And I can hear pieces of information in there that you really could tease out to have a valuable debate on. Right? But like you said, some people come to the table with like the word racist or racism. They got a whole new definition of it that fits their own narrative around their lack of emotional intelligence. And you cannot shift that in a moment with them. All you can do is hope to drop a pearl and hope that they'll follow up on that and then change that themselves. You cannot change that in that moment.
You know, that I was listening to somebody say, what is Biden afraid of? Not having an audience and having the mic shut on. It's not what he's afraid of. It's what he wants. Like if I'm an American, I would like some close approximation to the Lincoln Douglas debates. You know, like can we just have a discussion without one buffoon interrupting the other, without crowds tainting the response from the electorate out there, booing or cheering? I mean, Kennedy had Radical. Did Nixon and Kennedy have an audience for their televised debate? I don't think they did.
I don't think it was. No, I don't believe it was anything in the format. I mean, that's skirting my early childhood at that point. So most of what I know about that era is far more about the politics anyway, is far more from studying it rather than being there. But I mean, the reality is that what we've built into the system now is echo chambers to reinforce one side or the other. And that's the danger of something like Newsmax or a Fox News, because we have to understand that part of our, if you take any 10 people on average, any 10 people, male, female, don't matter what the age range is, and you propose to them any prospect that will benefit most of them, not all of them, most of them, I can guarantee you 1 to 3 of them will stand up and go, I don't like it. And when you ask them why they don't like it, they're going to go, because I don't. And that's as much answer as you will get out of them.
Yeah.
So the politics is geared toward these people, because all they have to do is post a few shitty memes. They get these people all riled up. What little critical thinking skills shuts down because they've now engaged their amygdala, and they basically become hate robots, whether they're in real life or online or whatever the case may be.
And I'd just like to interject, they are not just getting this from social media. This isn't solely coming from social media. This is coming from the pulpit too. On
Yeah, oh,
Sundays
absolutely,
when they
yeah.
go there. This is when they go to pray at their weekly prayer groups. This is happening, right? This is happening at their Sunday dinner table. The church is deeply ingrained in that, and we know that the church has mastered multimedia.
Miss
Absolutely.
Radical, didn't you at one point have the pastor tell you that you have to vote, if you're a Christian, you have to vote conservative in Alberta?
Yes, he did. I was in Alberta, and I was actually in Stephen Harper's district. And, I was a young mom. So I never, I subscribed to being Catholic, but I was at Christmas and Easter Catholic. My kids wanted to go to church and play with these church kids. So I went, maybe a little bit begrudgingly, but still wanting to be a good mom and become a part of the community. And they were right at the pulpit spewing to vote for Stephen Harper and to be a good Christian, not a Catholic. To be a good Christian, you should vote for Stephen Harper.
Well, if you want to know why there's 20, what was it, the Quebec's population doubled every 25 years until 1960. Some families, Jean Chrétien had 22 brothers and sisters. Why? Because the church told them that birth control was a work of the devil, it was evil, and you were going to go to hell if you did it. And by the way, vote for Maurice Duplessis in the Union Nationale, and if you don't, you're going to hell for that too. So that's why you're going to see maybe once a week me putting up not anti-religion, because I pray, but keep church out of it.
Well, one of the things that we have to realize when we're talking about the state that Canada is in, we have to talk about the finances that are funneled into the church. We have to realize that somewhere in the neighborhood of anywhere between $200 and $500 million a year in clean cash is siphoned out of Canada every year by the church tax-free. On top of that, just the Catholics alone in Canada own $4.5 billion worth of property. They are one of the big property players
That's
in
all
Canada.
taxable money.
What's that?
That's all taxable property.
Yeah, and all of this stuff is, so while they were crying to our poor Indigenous population that they could only scrape $2 to $3 million together, they were spending $30 million to build a new church in Toronto.
Yeah.
That was the truth. There's a documentary on Netflix called The Family. Mr. Radical clued me into this. It's a 4-part series, and I'll tell you, you want to know how the theocratic movement took over the United States and is now infiltrating Canada right through the far right movement with Tiny Trump there. You want to know how that happens? have a look at that 4-part series.
All the
It is
connections are there.
awesome. It'll connect all the dots. And when me and Mr. Kirby, we're going to do a conversation about the Christo-fascist movement, it's very linked into Preston Manning and Stephen Harper. And, you know, there's some big players behind the scenes in this theocratic movement that is now, they haven't like established themselves as a new church somewhere. They've infiltrated existing churches and convinced them to do this political piece. So the way I come from a religious background with Jehovah's Witness, door-to-door work. You know,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about there, never mind election. But you don't have to establish your own church. They go have a look at the United Church's website. They train disciples politically. It's right on their website. So they've gone in, and the far right movement in small sections have gone in and infiltrated bigger churches.
Yeah.
And then that goes. So
Well, one of the things that we've got to on the left be acutely aware of is that the right is playing the long game on this. And the reason that it's starting to come to head is the numbers for them are becoming unmanageable, because one of the oddities that they keep harping on, whether it's Canada or America, is the immigration problem. But the reality is we are not reproducing enough as a society to even maintain our population, never mind expand it. So what it has to be on their side is something beyond just the numbers themselves, and I think that's what it is. And that's why there's such a focus on the women's issues, the fertility issues, the overturning of Roe versus Wade.
Yeah,
Is they essentially know that they're getting fucked out of power.
Yep.
or not.
Yeah.
Well, in Canada, the average fertility rate per woman is 1.3 children. To replenish the population, you need 2.1 children. 420,000 people either die or emigrate from Canada every year. Without immigration, we cannot sustain our economy. So listening to people on the right bash, women's reproductive choices. Well, what about immigration?
That's what they do. Scream about immigration and make it a big boogeyman, right? Like Stephen Harper.
But
His
it
hotline.
certainly would solve the problem of. But the problem is, it's not white kids that are getting born, is it?
But at the same time, knowing this immigration law around labor, you have the provinces like Doug Ford coming in and asking to increase immigration for their agricultural needs, for example, right? So you've got a provincial, you've got a federal system that is in control of the immigration, but you've got a lot of pressure from the right-hand premiers to do something that they're saying is against what they believe federally. Like when you pay attention to federal politics as a conservative, you're anti-immigration, right? You're just anti-immigration. Yeah. But when you look at the
conservative, understand that. Sorry,
the door for immigration. So how do you marry those two things?
I don't mean to. I'm gonna have to kind of go. Okay. I'm sorry. I do want to thank Métis Mama for telling me not to engage other drivers on the road. So thank you for that. But I also want to thank Mrs. Radical and the Mrs. for hosting. I really, this is so cool. Beaver Politics, it's awesome. And I hope that you'll have me back again.
We hope you'll join us.
We have part 2, 3, 4, and 5 as far as I'm concerned. This has been a conversation, the first time we've ever gone on as long as we have. And I appreciate your insights and look forward to your TikToks too, right? So we'll have you back again another time. Leave that door open, and wanted you immensely for all the knowledge you've had to share with us tonight and helping to connect the dots in some of the, how to make that political piece personal, right? That's my motto. How do we connect? How do we take this system out in the universe that feels that way sometimes and bring it home? The power of one voice.
We didn't get.
I just wanted to say, Hey, Perry, thank you very much for that compliment. That's far too kind. But T-Jack, directed toward you, super appreciate this conversation. It was a really, really good one. And I think it was a really important one to have because a lot of creators are getting worn out, and we've got to know that this is purposeful. The intent of all of this is to wear us out, and we've got to stand up. We've got to continue to talk. Even if we're talking to two people, it's important. I honestly believe that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you to all the comments. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you again. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody.
Till
Thanks.
next Thursday, Canada. Have a good night. Thanks for joining Beaver Politics.
Good night.